Good evening, I'm Zaragonaut. Welcome to my studio. Yes, computer, you've told me that message about 6 times already. Go away. Right, Pyrography. The science of cooking wood. So turn the pyrography machine on will be a good start. And I'm trying to decide what to actually, or where to actually start. Not really. Well, I'll start where I always start, which is just where I feel like it. And just get on with it really. Let me just move that little glass daffodil over there. It's such a while since I've done any pyrography. I'm probably going to just spend a bit of time not working very fast, just getting used to it again. You know what, that's thinner. Okay. It is sort of well, it's changing tools. It's like changing paintbrushes or any other art form. It's getting used to what you're working with again. So if you've checked out the Zaragonaut Facebook page at any time, you've probably seen the shed. It's in the studio garden, and unfortunately it's in somewhat of a dilapidated state. So it is actually going to get rebuilt shortly, and it should look somewhat the same, but it's kind of just like for sentimental reasons, shall we say. It's I was going to say painting it. I suppose I am painting. I'm painting with heat. Painting the shed. Now you will see me turning the wood around quite a bit, that's just because it's easier. It's always easier to work in the natural curve of your arm or your wrist than it is to start and try and go against the curve. The other one is control of the heat, knowing where the heat is on the tool as well. It sometimes helps to go in a particular direction. So I'm going to get rid of those drawn in lines. I'm actually going to get rid of that one there as well. Now, I almost brushed them off by hand. I learnt I learnt a while ago that's not a good thing. Brush them off using a brush, because otherwise what can happen is you get if you brush them in with your finger, because it's basically rubber with carbon or whatever's on, you end up rubbing it into the pores of the wood, into the grain, and it stains the wood. You can't get it out, it's actually sort of embedded. But the only way to get it out is to sand it. Sanding it's not a good idea once you've started pyrography, because it changes the surface texture. So if you're not going to do something really dark over the top of a line, erase it before you put pyrography over it, otherwise it's kind of glazed in, you can't get rid of it. Let me get rid of that. Now then, this is about that wide. So that's the overhang of the eaves. I'm working with quite a light, I'm going to say a light iron, a light heat at the moment. Now, to some extent, the amount of heat in the tool does have an effect on how dark you can make the wood, but largely speaking, you can compensate for that by holding the tool against the wood for a lot longer. So effectively, the amount of heat in the tool controls how quickly the wood changes colour, rather than the actual ultimate colour of the wood. Because I can turn this up and I can make very light coloured marks just by being very fast, and I can turn it down and make really dark marks just by being really slow. Now, if you want to make consistent colour across a larger area, you're better off doing that slow, just because you have more time to control it. So I sort of put some on there, which actually wants, it's a shadow, so okay, so we'll deal with the shadow. It's wider, but it's a shadow, so we'll deal with the shadow in a little while. Now this is one of the darkest areas on the whole picture, so we will be just taking time. This is where I might well sort of turn it up. So I do have another concern when I'm working at low temperatures, and that is low temperatures. That is also, I have to watch the rest of the tool. I'm holding it slightly up, but the rest of the tool is radiating heat, and in fact it has, and I can see it. It browns the area around it. So sometimes you turn the tool up to get a quick reaction, so that it doesn't have time to radiate a lot of heat elsewhere on the board. Now really I'm not, although this is the darkest area, or that is up there, I'm really not too bothered at this stage of getting final absolute colour. That's just the way I work. There are some pyrographic artists that could do that in one go. I'm sort of practicing it. It would be nice to be able to do so, just because it speeds up the production of a picture. Otherwise what I have to do is to go over it either multiple times, like, you know, sort of like this, or I have to go a lot slower. I'm actually trying to decide just what I want to make, what and where. Now this bit I want it to be dark, so I'm not bothered about going over the graphite. I actually don't know what the stuff is made out of. Marks, because they're dark enough to hide it, as you can see there. Now some of the dark markings on the board that I'm doing are shadow. Some are the result of creosote having been applied to this shed over many years. So it's a sort of a fairly rustic shed in that respect. Now, because it's slightly dilapidated, there isn't too many straight lines, especially, well, there isn't any straight lines here on the boarding by design. It's a special type of boarding called waney edge timber, which is basically the edge of the tree. Oops, that's something I forgot to do. So let's do it now. I forgot to turn off the screen. Something around here smells of warm plastic. Don't know what it is. Yeah, turn off the screen saver on that computer. That won't do me any good if that triggers. So I'm really just sort of dotting around here at the moment. I'm sort of working my way into it, deciding just how things want to be. So I'm sort of, as I say, dotting around, doing bits and pieces, establishing a shape, a structure, a look. I don't know quite how you want to describe it, but sort of establishing some sort of framework within which I can then do more details. And I have realised that there is a line missing from here. It's somewhat like that. Yeah, that'll do. So this is kind of akin to what an artist would do is underpainting, putting in the blocks of colour, the sort of the main structures that they're after, no particular details, and then they go back in and progressively add more details, more colour, more finer representations of things. Now this is kind of doing that. So one of the things with pyrography is establishing tones. On any particular wood, you've only got so many. So this is birch plywood. I've got quite a lot. So I'm going through and just sort of starting with the darkest ones. When you're doing pyrography, a lot of what you see is your eyes fool you. So you don't see what's actually there. You see, well, you do, but you don't. You see what things look like in contrast to something else. So I can do a line on here that looks really dark until I put something next to it. Then suddenly that line looks a lot lighter because at the moment it's sort of dark against the white of the, I was going to say canvas, but the board. So something like this looks quite light. If I put something darker next to it, it'll look even lighter. If I put something lighter next to it, it'll look darker. So there's there's no real absolutes in a lot of this. It's all when you look at something, what's next to it that matters. And so a lot of times with pyrography, it isn't until you've got an overall colour over most of your image that you can actually start to get the final shades, unless you're really good at it. And I'm sure some artists are really good at it and they get it, apparently get it first time. How true that is, I don't know, but that's how it appears. Doesn't work that way for me. So some of this wood is highly weathered, it's very light, and some of it is dark because of the original coats of creosote that you were on it originally. Now so what I'm doing here isn't shadow. I mean, it might look like shadow and some of it is shadow, but some of it is just because the boards overlap each other. When it's rained on them, because of the sort of the overlap, the rain comes down, doesn't hit this bit of the board that's down here just underneath. It sort of drips or runs further down. So instead of sort of hitting here, it hits down here. So the creosote and stuff, that's wood preservative that was on this bit of the board, is being washed off. This bit just underneath the board above it, above the ridge, hasn't had much water on it, so it doesn't lose its, hasn't lost its colour over the years, or as much of the colour. So it's sort of an exaggerated shadow almost. It's a rain shadow in this particular case rather than a sun shadow, but similar sort of idea. So I'm working with the flat of the tool rather than the points, because it's a soft colour. There's no a sharp edge to it as such. It's a fluffy edge. I don't. If I put a sharp edge on it, it will look different. I've got to have a sort of a tapered edge. I can have a fairly clean transition from one to the other, but it sort of needs to be I don't want a sharp edge like that. So this is kind of like drawing with the edge of a pencil rather than the point. Now this is kind of a gift to pyrography. This is this sort of weathering, just because if I accidentally, like doing some of these lines, I have sort of overheated the board a little bit to one side of it, and browned it off a little bit, but doesn't matter. I'm going over it again. Now this isn't a perfect match to the shed, and again, for most things, including portraits to some extent, you don't need perfect matches. People look for things which are familiar to them, and once they recognise that, they see whatever it is, whether it's a portrait or whether it's, you know, an object. Once they can see it, and they recognise it as theirs, then it doesn't matter how accurate it is, it's theirs. It is what it is, and that's why sort of like caricaturists work, because they take something about somebody's face, for example, which is distinctive enough to recognise them, and they exaggerate it, but it's something that's familiar to the person or to whoever's watching, and therefore it becomes them, even though it's a sort of, you know, a grossly exaggerated thing, looks in quotes nothing like them, it's recognisable as them. So with something like this, where we're not exaggerating completely, but as long as you can get some of the key things in that make it recognisable to somebody, and it may only be sort of, in this particular case, for example, something like that little shape of wood there, and you go, oh yeah, I remember that, and all of a sudden it's their shed in this case. What I mean. I actually use this tool quite a lot because I've got such a range of uses for this, and like I just tipped it over then and used it as a really sort of sharp knife edge. But it's a knife edge that doesn't dig into the wood like using the knife edge would. So although the knife edge would actually get me as fine a line as I've just done, it would have dug in more and produced a cut. Okay, I'm fiddling with detail. But I've just started to establish the shape of that board. What I could do with doing is coming up this side here a little bit. Now, sometimes a little practice, use a pencil. Oh, if you've got the wood and want to do it with a pyrographic tool, sort of straightish sort of lines is a good thing to practice. So you can, over a distance like this, you can look down and go, I want to join that to that. And more or less meet it straight on, yeah, right, correctly first time. Of course, you can always get a ruler out, and I was going to say cheat. It's not cheating. If it works, it's not cheating. By the way, a good thing for this is, I was going to say a metal ruler. Metal rulers are not bad. Don't use a plastic one. Because if you're going to, well, the one thing of getting a straight line is to put your straight edge down and run the pyrographic tool down it. Which reminds me, have I got a headband around here somewhere? I'll have to look for it. So you can get straight lines if you can't do them freehand. A better tool rather than a metal ruler or a metal straight edge, because they can get hot, so when you pick it up you've had your tool against the edge for quite a while. Apart from that, it cools the tool down quite a lot and may make it hard to mark the wood. The piece of metal also heats up, so if you pick it up and you sort of might be uncomfortable. Glass, daft as it sounds, is really good, but you've got to be careful with glass. Glass is really good because it doesn't conduct heat very well. So quite literally, because it doesn't conduct heat very well, you won't get a lot of heat transfer from this to that, and therefore it doesn't cool it down as much as a metal contact would. And the other thing is, because glass doesn't conduct very much heat, when you come to pick it up, even if you pick it up fairly close to where you've had the tool against it, it won't actually be that hot or even hot at all. You do have to be a little bit careful though as to the glass that you use. There's two types of glass, in quotes: soft glass and borosilicate glass. If you apply heat against soft glass, there is a danger that you will stress the glass and it will shatter or break, crack. If you're lucky, it'll just crack. Well, if you're lucky, nothing will happen. But if you're slightly less lucky, it'll crack. And if you're less lucky than that, it'll actually, I'll say explode. I don't mean necessarily, a great big sort of TNT type explosion, but glass shards will come flying off. Not a good thing. Borosilicate glass, I can hold that against that all day and it'll just go, yeah, and. This is borosilicate glass. Borosilicate glass used to be, well, it's a trade name, but used to be known as Pyrex glass. Pyrex is the trade name for the company that first introduced borosilicate glass. It's a glass which resists stress. So that's why borosilicate glass. Pyrex used to be used, or is used, for like oven glassware. You can put it in an oven, heat it up rapidly, take it out, put it in cold water, and the glass just goes. And yes, try that with soft glass. You would have glass all over the place, probably before you took it out of the oven. Maybe even before you shut the oven door. But certainly you putting it in water, it would just go everywhere. But borosilicate glass is still, yeah, I can do that. It's not worthy. This is a couple of 100 degrees. That's not even concerning it. Glass is such a poor conductor of heat. I could hold us over 2,000 or 3,000 degree flame there, and hold that there, and my fingers wouldn't even be getting hot with a flame, just there. In fact, when I made the bend in this, because I made this, I was holding it there, I was directing the flame there, and this melted and bent over, and I didn't feel any heat. So it's, you know, you can use a glass straight edge is what I'm getting to, but ideally one that's made from borosilicate glass. But as I'm not doing geometric based drawings here, I'm not that bothered about perfectly straight lines. I can do them well enough for what it is I'm after. I mean, this is wood, it's an organic material, and over, in this particular case, over the years, you know, the wood has warped, stretched, shrunk, split, and all sorts. So you know, even if there were perfectly fitted joints previously when this was first built, they ain't now. Now you can do lines in short segments like I'm doing here. Now you can do it with a pencil as well. There is a downside to trying to do it using short segments, and that is you can get blobs as you start and stop a segment, and the other is you can get inconsistent colouring. Both of which are controllable if you practice, but also, you know, sometimes it is better to do slightly longer things. So a complete line segment like that. Now then, that board wants to go all the way to that edge, and then we've got a board edge visible here. And I know we've got another board edge visible here. These boards are actually something like about 1/2 inch thick, so just tip the tool up, so I'm using just the real tip of the toe here, and keeping the rest of the what would be the heel of this away from the wood. It's going to get coloured anyway, but I want to control that. I don't want it being done just because I was careless with how I'm using the tool. Now that one's going to disappear round about there. And this one's a lot. Okay, so one of the things that's kind of important in this is to get the inside edge of this as not as a straight line but as a consistent line, because then it becomes more believable. It's one of the small details where if it's not a, because this is, you kind of, and you will sort of see this as a sort of a corner piece here, and it doesn't look right if it's not consistent, because you kind of expect it to have, I'll say a straight edge, not necessarily straight, but a straightish edge, and it doesn't look right if there's sort of is a slight mismatch between the edge. Okay, yeah, carry on with this. I was going to say, unfortunately, I can't. One of the things I was going to show you, hopefully I was going to show you tonight, was going to be some glasswork. I can't. It hasn't arrived. I made I actually did some glasswork last Friday, which is why I didn't stream. And it got put in a kiln to be annealed. So I haven't bothered, as I didn't bring it home. It's being posted this week. It's not yet arrived. I was hoping it would be here today, so I'd be able to show you some glasswork, but I can't do that just at the moment. So I'm still hoping it'll be here for Friday, possibly Saturday. But if it's here for Friday, I'll get to show you on the stream on Friday some more glasswork. And these, I mean, I've shown you already the daffodil here, and I've got a couple of Christmas ornaments, or a couple of baubles that I made. So that's the first one ever that I did, which is a lot better than the second one that I did. But you know, it's the second one I did. So I'm not bothered. They weren't annealed, by the way, which is why they're here and I can show you them. They didn't get annealed, but they most of the other work that I did has been, has been annealed. You have to wait sort of several hours for it to cool down. So as the last piece went into the kiln just before I left the place, several hours is sort of sometime the next morning. Okay, now we'll just turn that over. Because that is literally a hairline. Yeah, and I can see that all the way up then to the top up there. Stop there for the minute. Now that board then comes over to here. So I can now join these lines up to the edge there. Ow. It's kind of, I find it amusing, I'm finding it amusing now that you just suddenly got ow then, because the heat was rising up from this tool and my thumb was getting hot, and you know, this tool's a couple of 100 degrees C. I actually don't know what the temperature of the tool is. I did measure it once and I can't remember what it was. And I'm just thinking, I literally was just thinking to myself, I'm finding that hot. I almost burned myself quite a lot of times when, I don't know if I almost burned myself, that's maybe an exaggeration, but let's say the heat gets really uncomfortable to the point where I've got to stop. It's painful. Painfully uncomfortable without actually burning myself. Well, quite a lot of times while I'm doing pyrography, and I was thinking on the glass blowing, I'm using a several thousand degree torch, glass which is glowing, you know, dull white or actual white hot, and I'm holding it sort of an inch away, and I think there's only about one time in sort of 8 hours of work where I actually felt slightly uncomfortable with it. I mean, a couple of times was, ow, that's hot, I'm going to have to move soon, as opposed to, ow, a minute ago, ow, that's hot, I have to move now. And I say, at one point, with a sort of an inch marble, I was, that's getting uncomfortable, but, and yeah, this little tiny tool. It's I find it amusing. I know it probably doesn't mean anything to you guys, but yeah, little things amuse me like that sometimes. So let's do a little bit more work around here. Okay, we've got an almost straight line under this windowsill here, so let's put that in. Now I am doing short segments here. I'm lifting the tool off because I want the tool to heat up. When you put it down on the wood, it cools off fairly rapidly, and although it's been continuously heated, it's cooler, so you don't get as quick a temperature change with it, a colour change with it. By lifting it off a couple of seconds, you give it time to heat to conduct through, and also more heat to be generated in there, and it keeps the tip hotter. Yeah, close enough. Now I'm actually going to turn the fan on, which is underneath the desk here. Yeah, then, so again, let's do some down the side of the window here. So we're starting to establish the edge of the window frame. And that literally is just from there. I really ought to establish this far edge as well. I think at this point, or at least put some of it in. Now to do that I'm going to erase it. Those lines go roughly to the edge, so I'm going to erase this, that way I don't cook it in. One thing I have noticed is that because I sanded this with wet and dry paper and I used about 1500 grit, it's really quite smooth. This stuff comes off a lot easier. Being careful not to rub it into the grain of the wood that still is there. Something I don't like about these pens is that connector. It's not a fantastically good connector for power handling. They might do this better. Okay. This is an audio connector. And yes, an audio connector can be handling tens of amps, but it's not really. These are kind of line connectors. So if you're not got a really good connection there, you get resistance. Resistance is heat, which is what's happening at that end, and any resistance here or heat here is taking it away from that end. So you want that to be cold, to be honest. If it's at all warm, then you've got resistance there, which is not good. Okay, so what I want to do now is at least do some slight edging, but only some. A little bit down there. Say some because the boards are effectively angled, the bottoms stick out, so they're overlapping that edge. So I don't want it all, I don't want to go straight down the edge there, it just would not be right. Yeah, and that board is, that's the edge of the board altogether, so we'll fill that in afterwards. They're overlapping the frame on this side, so that's a case of shaping it afterwards. That frame is rotten, but we'll shape that afterwards. You're getting an idea of what's happening here. Okay, so here we've got That wants to be quite dark with a sharp edge on that edge. And it's dark there. Yeah, I'll do. Again, stuff to fill in afterwards. That actually doesn't look... Oh, I see, yes. Okay, so now time to add a little bit more colour to this edge because it's looking not quite the right sort of size. And that is because it's not wide enough. I ought to be doing this on an easel. I ought to get my easel out. Maybe for the next... Like I say, maybe for the next stream. It's just under the desk. You know what, let's stop messing about, let's actually get the easel out. No, I say no, because it is down there. I could quite easily put it on the desk here. I'd probably want the drawing board on it, because it's a fairly small piece of wood to hold on the easel itself, and the drawing board is A3, which means I've got to move the camera, I've got to move the light, I've got to move the pyrography machine, I've got to move the stream deck to make enough room on this desk to be able to put the easel on comfortably to then be able to work. So we're not doing that. Changed my mind. It is a lot nicer to work on the easel, but yeah, not today. Now this is, I was going to say, it's perfectly normal to do multiple passes to something with pyrography, but then the thought occurred to me, there is actually sort of 2 or 3 different classes of pyrography, or styles, techniques, I'm looking for kind of the right word to use. I have a preference for working in this style. So what is this style? This style is I would describe it as a photorealistic style. Okay, but that doesn't mean this will look like a photograph when I've finished. But what it means is that when you look at a photograph, you see different shades of colour. Even if you see a black and white photograph, it's not just black or white, there's various shades of grey, various tones of grey. The other thing you see is if you look at a face, or in this case a hut, you don't see a black outline around it. Okay. When somebody's face comes to an end, comes to an end, the pink bit just stops as far as you're looking at it, and then you see the background behind it. And that's the style that I like doing with pyrography. So the colour defines the edge, not a black line. And I've got different shades, so there'll be lighter and darker shades of brown, monochrome. There's another style which is I tend to describe it as a cartoon style, which literally has those black outlines. So you draw an outline of the shed, and then you might colour it in. You'd have the basic sort of shape. Then you might colour it in, darker areas or lighter areas. Generally, you might colour the whole section in, just like you would with a cartoon. It's blocky colour. There is some shading in it. You can get some really complex cartoons that are black outlined and that do have really sort of graduated colour and shades and all this sort of stuff. So I'm using a simplification. And then there's the pure black and white. It's two-tone. It's either, well, not even two-tone. It's either black or it's white. So there is either a line or there's not a line. And with that style, that is itself is not necessarily the end of the game, because there are some literally where you just draw an outline. There are others where you use crosshatch shading, for example. So if you want an area which is grey, you draw lots of small lines. The more lines you draw in an area, the closer you get to the black. The less lines, the closer you get to the white. So that's cross-hatching. Sometimes because you actually do it as a cross, sometimes it's just depends on how dark you want that particular area to be. There's also one that's called, I think it's called pointillism, where literally it's dots, which is kind of like what newspapers used to. I say used to print because I haven't looked at a newspaper for a long time. But when they used to do black and white photographs, there used to be dots. They sometimes use larger dots or smaller dots. So larger dots are darker. So larger dots in an area will look darker. Smaller dots will look lighter. The more dots in an area, of whatever size they are, the darker it will look, and the lighter it will look. So a few dots around is light. Some really close packed large dots will look really dark. So you can still do sort of full shading with just pure black and white. So it's something to experiment with. I do that sort of cross-hatch type work when I do scraperboard, which is black and you scrape it to make it white. So you scrape a cross-hatch, which may not be a regular pattern, may just be random scratches, but to actually give you that grey tone. There are ways to sort of half scrape away the black, but that's really hard to control. So we're getting there. So this is a photorealistic style. Doesn't mean it'll look like a photograph, but it uses the same premise as a photograph. Okay, I want that to lead in a little bit more. I'm playing about with details. It is something I've tried to avoid doing, and actually doing in quotes what an artist should do. An artist should do what an artist wants to do, not what everybody else says they should do. But I have sort of experimented in the past with doing the large blocky areas, not consciously avoiding the details, coming back to them later. I kind of enjoy working the way I am doing, which is with details, more than trying to do large blocky areas first. I find it just works better for me just to do the bits that I feel like doing at the time. I bet I couldn't do that again. That's just a board that's come out rather nicely in that light colour, and I managed to get a really consistent colour across it. Trouble is, I don't want it that light, I actually want it darker. So quite a lot of time here what I'm doing is trading time for consistency. So I could turn up the heat, or I could slow down this tool, make this really dark, which is kind of what I'm after, really quickly, but it will look patchy. It won't look smooth, and it won't look like a shadow does, which is, has a, even though it has a hard edge, it has a softish sort of edge. And you tend not to get lumpy bits in the shadow. Yeah, my light source is up here somewhere. Wasn't a very sunny day when the photograph was taken that I'm using as a reference here. Okay, so this bit wants to be quite dark, so I'll slow down and let it cook the wood. Now to take an existing bit of pyrography, which is this, and make it darker, takes more time, takes more quantity of heat than it would do to have made it do that first time. So when you cook something for the second time, it sort of takes more heat. So I've got to either be more patient or turn up the heat. Sometimes it can be quite difficult I might describe it as overcook it, to cook it for the second time, to get it dark. You sometimes go sort of a really sort of darkish brown. You just can't get it any darker. And it really almost doesn't matter just how much heat you apply. It just does not want to go darker. In which case, if that's what's happening to you, you're kind of stuck with it. So what you would tend to do at that point is, if you really need it to be darker, is to try and adjust things around it. So leave things that are around it lighter than you would do. That way your ice field makes it look darker anyway. I mean, this looks quite dark now, but I virtually guarantee if I put something fairly dark around it, this won't actually look as dark as it does. Now, one of the nice things, I guess, and it's just occurred to me about this, is this is wood. And by that I mean the picture that I'm doing, this is wood on the shed. And so any wood grain that comes through the pyrography kind of looks natural. So it's not like a portrait where I may be concerned about wood grain. Here it sort of looks alright. I just noticed there's, like, you can see little spots here, which are probably little branches. Perhaps that was starting to grow out of the tree, but here they just look like knots in the wood. And then it is a fairly dark edge just around there, so we're getting the bottom of the board. Now I am cooking the bit underneath here, not particularly an issue to me in this particular case, as I will be applying pyrography to that as well. Right. Oh no, I was about to say bother. Or worse, that effect, I thought it had gone too high, I haven't. Okay, let's start to put some of these board edge stuff in. The paint shadows, or the rain shadows. Well, not nearly enough detail in these rain shadows. They should be graduated, but again, it's something I come back to. And there's a windowsill there. And there's a black line just underneath it. Don't want to do that bit of it there. It's a broken windowsill. We'll come back and look that over at some other point. This board here is quite dark. Actually, we'll put some of that in now, I think. Now you can put sort of a texture in here by, I mean, for example, as I'm just following around there, there'll be a, well, depending on the wood, depending just on exactly how good you are at matching colours, there will be very slight variations between individual strokes here of the pen. And so sometimes you can get a perception of like a grain, which is why, for example, well, if you're doing cats, you're doing anything like cats, for example, with fur, even if you aren't doing the fur itself, if you use your pen following what would be the fur lines, it looks a lot more realistic than if you sort of just go backwards and forwards like you might scrub in an area. So if you sort of followed the fur lines, like if this was a cat fur along its back, if I go this direction, then it will look just natural, just because sort of these slight variations they're going in the right direction. Hello, Wolfie. You have a, yeah. Okay. Well, I noticed I had the number 2 displayed on my screen here, telling me 2 people were watching. But I didn't know if that was my own thing or not. So, what's this new 3D that you've been designing? Is this another fence or gate? You've already finished it? Okay. Is this one you started this week, or you started it some time ago? Yeah, that's okay, it's down there. Special fence, okay. Yeah, so really rather dark straight underneath that edge there. Quite dark for the rest of the board as well, so we're going to be about this colour for most of the board. What's so special about it then, Wolfie? Other than the fact that you designed it, that is. So I bring the most of this board sort of into, this is the darkest part, but lighten it up as I come along the board, but just along this edge is the darkest part, so I'm going to just follow that through. Some of that shadow and some of it is just again because of the way it's a rain shadow, so the wood preservative hasn't been, as much of it hasn't been washed off just under the edges of these boards. A 3-layer fence. Okay. No, I can't imagine a 3-layer fence. You've got me there. I suppose I sort of can, but the only sort of 3-layer in I think of is fairly simplistic stuff. So. So now darkening down the rest of the board here, and what I'm looking for is feather, but sort of lose the sharp edge on this dark stuff here, so that it sort of fades down into the rest of the dark stuff. I don't especially want too much of a really dark edge around this. Don't want a really hard defined edge. and it is one of these projects where if I get like sort of like blobs, like they're looking to me, I'm seeing some blob-like structures here, but they're looking kind of like runs. It's an outdoor weathered board. That sort of thing is kind of inherent in the picture that I'm looking at. So again, if you like picking a subject where mistakes like that look more natural than not having them there. So it actually means I'm not being trying to be as consistent with colouring as I might. If this was a person, for example, I certainly wouldn't want that sort of marks. But here they work quite well, so I am not trying to be too consistent because of that. So Wolf, you've been playing a new game since we last talked? I think I've sort of watched some of the E3 conference that was on not so long ago. I say conference, you know, whatever it is, exposition, whatever you might describe the game shows as. Didn't really see anything there particularly to interest me. Did see a trailer that looked quite interesting, called, what do you call it? Satisfactory, as in satisfaction and factory joined together. The trailer was really rather good. If the game's anything like it, then it certainly will be visually quite nice. It appeared to suggest it was going to be played like a 3D version of Factorio. Same sort of premise, but you know, bootstrapping from nothing all the way up to sort of complex machines with conveyor belts and everything, and in the same style Factorio is, but done in 3D, in a first-person view as well, by the looks of it. So that potentially looked to be an interesting game for me. How many do I think you? I by the fact that you're asking the question, or you're being sarcastic like that, I think you probably buy quite a few. But whether you play them is another matter. I used to buy loads of games, and then realised I didn't really play them, so I stopped. I had literally had boxes of PS2 and PS1, PS2, Dreamcast games. Before I realised that most of the well over half of the ones that I'd bought, I'd never even taken out the packaging, never opened. So I consciously now, since then I've consciously just don't buy them. I don't buy many console games anyway, but not even the PC ones. I really have to like the idea of playing it before I buy them these days. You bought Far Cry 3? Oh, you buy the Humble. Yeah, you mentioned Humble Bundles before. I've looked at some of those, but quite often it's kind of like, nah, for me anyway. It's weird with the Humble Bundles. Even if there's sort of if there was one game in the bundle that I wanted, I'd be kind of going, yeah, but I don't want all the others, and I kind of don't want to. I know you pay what you want to pay usually, but it would be kind of, I don't want to pay for those. I can't try to think. I watch it. I'm not fantastically interested in it for playing, but. Nah. I don't know about him. He'll either work or it won't. Yeah, no, I follow, and yes, you get all these extra games for nothing. You know, like as you say, 12 extra games, but it's kind of like 12 extra games I don't want. And I know you don't have to install them, but I've still got them. And yeah, I'm more likely to wait until it's it's on sale on Steam for $12. I don't know. It's just my sort of slightly quirky way of looking at things. I think it's totally irrational. You know, there's nothing. There's no way I'm being sensible in that respect, but. Yeah, I mean, it's. I suppose it is a good way if you feel like trying. You know, it looks interesting enough to maybe have a go, but you don't think it's going to grab your interest so much. Then it is a good way of sort of trying out lots of games. They tend to be fairly older ones though, so it's sort of. No, I'll rephrase that. When I looked, they tended to be a lot of the older games, you know, like Serious Sam or something like that, where, although I quite like Serious Sam, I've got a few of those, but you know, it's kind of like I didn't want them back then either, so why would I want them now? And it sort of, I don't know, it sort of feels a bit like, to me, you know, you want to buy X, but the only way you can buy X is to get Y, Z and A, B and C with it, so they're kind of forcing them on you just so you can get the one that you want. And I know it's not really like that, but I don't know, just me being a bit tentative perhaps. Tell you what I've got just recently as well, just to slightly change the subject. I've just got 4 of these. I've got 4 4TB drives. So I now have the drives to go in the new to go in the new. I've had it 6 months. I've got a microserver sat over there, and I've only just got the 4 drives for it. So this weekend I'm going to be hopefully firing up the microserver for the first time and seeing whether I can make that thing work. I want to do backups on it, and which is why I've got the 4 TB drives and you know, one or 2 other things on it. Then with a bit of luck I can release that server I've got over there so that I'll be able to use that as a streaming PC, unless I can find a Unix machine around here that I can stream on. Actually, oh no, I was thinking for when I'm out in this thing, I could do with a streaming PC out there, and the deaf thing that just came to my mind then was I could always run up a virtual machine on the server, but then I've got the server in the house and the cameras in there, and that wouldn't work very well. But anyway. Yeah, I want to get my backup server working. I want to get one installed because I want to be able to back up the Unix machines that I've got. One of them is the primary controller for the house and DNS, and it hosts the Wi-Fi controllers as well. And from time to time that dies for no apparent reason. It just stops. It did it today. And one of these days it's not going to come back up. And I'm going to have to rebuild it from scratch and try and remember how I built it in the first place. And I would love to be able to back that thing up. And then if I do have to, I can always do a bare metal restore and come up within a shorter period of time than rebuilding it would do. All the PCs back up to a Windows server, but it won't do the Unix. So while you've tried those, the extra games that you get with sort of humble bundles and stuff, Wolfie, have you ever found any that you really wanted, you carried on playing? Or has it really been just sort of try it and uninstall it, or just leave it sat on your hard disk and you've never actually sort of played it more than once? I know I did buy a humble bundle once in the past, and I actually bought it for one of the extra games. I didn't actually want the headline game at all. It was something that was completely of no interest to me. I'll just make it up like a football game or something, which I've got no interest in. And I was after sort of one of the add-on games. But I remember spending quite some time trying to see if I could find the add-on game without buying the whole bundle. It's a long time since I've done any pyrography, and I'm really enjoying doing. I really like doing. Well, I like doing most of the art forms that I do, and I kind of miss not doing them. But I kind of realise I miss not doing them when I do them again. And it's kind of like I sort of realise that I've kind of missed doing this. I love creating images. Unfortunately, I suspect when I start doing the glass work, I'll probably end up doing a lot of that, and I won't end up doing very much sort of this sort of art, 2D art very much after that, which is kind of a pity. I might have to sort of force force myself to actually sort of, you know, maybe one day a week or something do some form of two-dimensional art. Yeah, what I might have to try and do is in here, in the studio here, is make sure I get things set up so I've kind of always got the pyrography out in this particular place on the desk, and maybe the airbrush there, and maybe something else down there, just so that I can, you know, oh, I feel like doing X tonight, and it's there. I don't have to get it out. You've just gifted in Far Cry. Yeah, that was one way, but one way of doing it, so that they can you can get a partner to play. You have a problem, and I know that you know the answer. Are we into metaphysics now? You're you mean the fact that you're ultra competitive. That doesn't look too bad. What does it look like on screen? It looks a bit weird on screen, but that's because I can see my guidelines and you can't on the screen. Yeah. I've got guidelines all the way around here and I can see them, so it looks slightly differently to me. Interesting. Here I am putting detail in again. Can I get some sort of edge in? Time to see if I can get rid of the line, the guideline. Okay, I'm able to get rid of that top one. You are a bit dirty, aren't you? You have to keep your erasers clean, so make sure that you don't end up with pencil on the end. So things like the white rubbers, the white actual sort of latex rubbers, they hold a lot of the pencil, if you use it on pencil, right on the edge, and it's not good to use them on something like this because you literally rub the carbon into the wood. And even with these plastic erasers, you got to make sure that it's clean, otherwise you do exactly the same thing. You rub the pencil marks or whatever it is you've used actually into the surface of the wood. Okay, this is quite light to the point where some of it is almost white. Now that's the background. Now my background here is trees. And I don't really know how to do trees. So what we'll be doing with the trees is doing the same thing we always do, which is just sort of pick an area and just do it. There you can't see the marks I've just put on there, it's too light. So it's a weird trade-off with this. I need enough light for you to see, because for example if I turn these lights off above me I can see perfectly well, but this camera just goes black. But I've got glare off the lights on this board, and Pyrography itself kind of smooths the wood so it's reflective, so you're getting glare off the Pyrography. Oh, it's actually why the easel's really quite good, because at an angle like this you don't get the glare because the light bounces not back at the camera. Yeah, we got to about that. Okay. I'm enjoying this. It's a while since I've done any. Now some of this board is really light coloured, and being able to do that, whatever representing that, is going to be an interesting thing for me. Whether it turns out to be interesting for you guys watching, I'm not sure, but representing really light colours can be difficult. I mean, for example, I couldn't easily represent sort of a really light colour just on the edge here. I need something darker behind it, which in this case it has, but so that you can actually see the light colour. You can't see, you know, the light colour. If that's all white, then you don't see it unless there's something dark like this alongside it. So if you were to paint all these boards white, whilst I would say you know, it'd be hard to see them, you see them because of the shadows underneath the boards and the reflections that you might get off it, rather than the fact that they're white. If you're wondering how I do white, or how I get white on a pyrographic board, there's kind of two ways of getting white on a pyrographic board. One is not to put any colour there, but put stuff around it. Your eye then thinks it's white, and you actually see white even if it isn't. The other way is to get something like a white wax pencil or chinographic pencil, or just a white pencil, and use it. After all, nobody says it has to be 100% pyrography, and sometimes in actual fact it might be interesting to put green on the background. For like, there's grass around here, there's trees around there, it might well be interesting to actually use a pencil, coloured pencil, and put green on here, and possibly then a little bit of pyrography over the top of it, which will seal the colour and give it this sort of slightly brown sort of look, which, given that the soil underneath, wouldn't be too much of a problem. I might experiment with that. Might be an interesting idea to try. Coloured pencils and pyrography. After all, I keep trying new things, so why not try something different for pyrography? I did it with the scraper board, where we did actually a thatched cottage in scraper board, but then the grass that was around it, having scratched the grass, we actually, or I say we, it's the royal we, used some green ink on the grass, and it looked really effective. And this has to certainly have some colour on it, so let's give it a little bit of colour, so we just knock the white off. Because it isn't pure white, so that's interesting. So it might not be extremely visible what I'm doing there, but again, it's one of these things that's visible in person. Kind of sort of trying to emulate a little bit of what I'm seeing in the picture, but I'm sort of putting lines in it. It's almost a cross hatching, but not quite. Just to give a sort of a rough wood texture looking thing, because the way in which the surface colour has come off is the grain of the wood is like dips, with the rings more prominent the harder they don't dip, they don't shrink as much. And when the paint comes off, the ridge, or the wood preservative has come off the ridges of the hard tops of the rings, and so you've kind of got light dark lines in the wood ring structure. And it's interesting to try and just sort of simulate some of those in here. I've sort of just putting some marks in, but I might actually sort of see if I cool this down a little bit, being able to actually sort of do a number of parallel lines. Maybe something I'll just have a play about with. He says, thinking, let's have a play about with it. Cool that down. So we've just got actually it's working. Well, the details that you kind of have to be here to see, but that worked quite nicely. And I can still control the colour by the background colour, so because the lines sort of cut down into the wood a little bit, then the slight darkness stays there even when I apply an overall colour over the top. A bit like how a tattoo stays there when you suntan. Okay, experimental stuff. Yeah, I know it's not had a backup. It's not turned on. Go away, thank you. But I've had some fun tonight. Hopefully those of you watching have found it interesting. So we've kind of just started putting in sort of odd bits of detail to start to define it. So some of the board marks, some of the underboard marks, and here starting to do some of the texturing of the boards, even though we've not got the windows in yet. Windows and the door is negative space. They're white-ish. Paint's coming off, but they're kind of whitish. So what I want to do is do the things around them, and things like the boards here, because they're warped, they're sticking out, so they're overlapping from this angle that you're looking at. For example, they're overlapping the door. So the boards kind of need to be in there first, so you know to avoid them when you do the door. You'll leave that bit out. If I do the door first and then try and put the board over the top, it won't look right. And I can't quite decide what to do with the windows. It might just be darkened inside, rather than trying to represent what I actually see through the windows. After all, this isn't a photographic copy, it's an interpretation. But we have finished for tonight. I'm quite pleased with it, given that I've not done this for, actually it's about 6 months. I think when I was looking on YouTube the other night, I think it's at least 6 months since I did pyrography. So I've got to learn how to use the tools again. I'll just get back into it. Like they say, you'd never forget how to ride a bicycle once you've learned, but you sometimes need a bit of practice. That's kind of like what this is. A bit of practice using the tools again until it kind of clicks back into place, and then I'll be able to sort of speed up and go a little bit further. But like everything else, I've never done a shed before, so it's relying on the old sort of technique, which is draw what I see, not what I think it should look like. I see it looks dark, do a bit of dark there. I see that bit looks lighter, so don't make it as dark. And I'm just doing shapes. Not it's a plank of wood, not where's the shadow. That's just a bit darker, I'll do that just a bit darker. I'm following it in that way, and what I will eventually find is, oops, I've done the shed. It will just sort of do itself almost. The bit that's going to be challenging for me on this one really is going to be the trees. There's trees behind, grass down the front, representing that in some way. That's going to be the challenge. I really don't know how to do the trees, other than we might just do them sort of, as I mentioned, sort of pointillism type thing, since they're sort of small leaves. I wouldn't be doing the leaves, I'd be doing the spaces between the leaves. So, lots of, I don't know. Or maybe I go below that, I'm just going to do a darkish background, just a background, a grey background, grey, brown, that's monocolour background. Don't know, we'll see when we get there. Next stream will be, what day is it today? It's Wednesday, so next stream will be on Friday, 7 PM UK time. You're sad because it's the end, sorry Wolfie, but I have to go to sleep at some time. I've got some other stuff to do. After this I've got a video to cut and upload, and I want to have something to eat. I want to have another drink, so Towie, been doing it for 2 hours, and that's a good length of time. So what I was saying, Wednesday, yes, 7 PM UK time, that's 1800 hours GMT. If you want to see this stream again, it will be here on Twitch for about a couple of weeks, but it will also, after tomorrow night, it will also be up on YouTube if you'd like to see this or the previous ones on YouTube, or any of the other videos. Any other broadcast just about that I've ever done on Twitch is now on YouTube. plywood.com/Zaragonaut. So you can have a look there. Anything, they're all almost all in series. So if you wanted to see the pyrographing of Theo the cat, it's there. Theo the cat. Look for Theo the cat. You'll find Theo the cat. For any of the others, Maui, Punia. Whoa, that's just two. That's two cats, but there's all sorts of stuff. Trains, planes. There's no automobiles, not that I can think of anyway. There's Punchcraft, there's the Scraperboard. They're all there in individual series. So check them out if you're at all interested. But with that, again, thank you for watching. Hope I will see you on Friday for the next stream. Bye for now. Farewell as well, Wolfie. See you hopefully on Wednesday. Bye.